All right, everyone, the moment you have all been waiting for, part 11. UFOs, aliens, fallen angels, the truth comes out. We are going to take a look at what really happened in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. As you all know, when I began this series, I was contacted. I received a message from a person who simply stated, if you want to know what really took place in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947, call me. Well, I did, and I spent hours upon hours, days upon days, countless hours going over this story. And what I would do, I would backtrack. I'd go back to the beginning. I'd jump around the story just to see if at any point uh, the story may have changed. Well, it did not. Now, the caller explained to me that he's kept the secret in for all these years. It's just been eating away at him. And it's time the truth came out. He elected me because I'm a pastor, and he wants everyone to know and to understand. Um, Without Jesus, there's no chance. There is no chance at all. Jesus is your only hope. Now, you may want to stop the video right here and just pause it and say a prayer, because the information I'm going to bring you and provide to you is not in any way intended to frighten you, but to enlighten you and to bring out the truth. More and more people today, before we get into what happened in Roswell, New Mexico, we are under great spiritual attack. And I believe it began in 2011, and it's on the increase. People are experiencing a form of sleep paralysis where they just simply cannot move. Others are experiencing a more severe form of sleep paralysis where they feel they're being held down. They can't move. They can't talk. They can't breathe. They feel a heavy weight on them. And they are experiencing physical attack and sexual attack. That's very key. They come out of this experience of sleep paralysis with bruises and marks all over the body, scratches on their body. More and more now we hear talk, if you just look around the YouTube channel, about people seeing what's known as shadow people. If you remember back in part 10, we listened to the physicist. There's another level, a level 4, dark energy. And there's something very dark behind everything that we've been through so far in this series. And we looked at the New World Order, the One World Government, the secret societies, the Illuminati, and the technology we have today. Now, before we begin, this happened in 1947, and the caller wants me, I've got my notes. I think I have it all memorized, but so bear with me. Wants everyone to understand this happened in 1947. Now, even today, I think we hear tell of people seeing flying saucers, what appear to be a flying saucer, around nuclear facilities. And keep that in mind. Now, World War II ended in 1945, and Nazi Germany. Now look at Hitler's regime and the Holocaust, and the reasoning behind his sick thinking. But during World War II, we come to discover that Germany had some pretty advanced weaponry, and we wondered where did they come up with this advanced technology? Now keep an open mind. Don't draw any premature conclusions. In 1945, now when Ike was still in power, they were trying to, as the war ended, to talk about Operation Paperclip now, to get these scientists over here to the United States. And when Roosevelt came in power, that's exactly what happened. Now, a lot of people are going to say, Roswell incident, we got it all figured out. It was a German wing or spy plane. Now, think about this. Where did that technology? I don't know if you've seen pictures of that. Do your research. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of heads up of what the caller wants me to explain. Look at that. It looked like a flying saucer. Where did that technology come from? And if that was actually the case, rather than cover it up and hide it, it would have been on the headline of every newspaper. I'm telling you, across the United States, across the United Kingdom, around the world. They'd be showcasing that. They wouldn't be covering it up. Here we are, 2012, and the Roswell incident. They say it was a downed weather balloon, and to this day, it's classified, top secret. We're going to find out what I believe really took place in Roswell, New Mexico. Now, before I bring you any more information, I'm going to explain a little bit about the caller and his background. It comes from a long line of military in his family, himself, his father, his father's father, dating back as far back as the Revolutionary War. So this is not just some average person on the street. Strong military background, which we're going to find out in a moment how strong. And I got to be careful, again, as I bring you this information. Before we hear the story, I want to remind you that years later, after the Roswell incident took place, and they deemed it to be a weather balloon, and case closed, witnesses started coming forward. And let's take a listen to their testimonies before we begin, and I explain the entire story of what really took place in Roswell, New Mexico. So I'm going to play the audio of a few for you, just so you have a understanding. The stories all seem to coincide.
My name is Jack Drawbridge, and I was assigned to Roswell in April of 1947. I was further assigned into intelligence with Jesse Marcel, who was the head of intelligence, a major. I was a first lieutenant pilot. On this particular evening, we're having bridge at Major Marcel's home. He was there in a basket. My wife was there. All of intelligence was there playing bridge, except Jesse. He was out with a pickup gathering this junk in the debris field. Okay? So when he came in, it was fairly late, I believe. And we broke up the bridge game then to go out and see what Jesse brought in. And it was a great interest. It was aluminum in appearance. There were fragments of aircraft scanner, whatever the thing was, and also some girders with pictures of hieroglyphic-like things on it. I took them to be owls, but who knows? Anyhow, it was interesting. I did get to handle the material, and the material had some peculiar properties. For instance, it looked like Hershey bar wrappings, but you squeeze it up in your hand as hard as you could, let go, and it returned originally to the original shape instantly.
Now I'm going to go on to a few more. Now these are eyewitnesses that have come out after the fact.
I'm Pat Bush, and I was married to George Bush, the brother of Miriam.
I want you to listen closely to this. Closely.
And her name was Miriam Titus whenever I knew her. She worked at the hospital, at the base hospital. She was an executive secretary there, had a high security rating.
Pay close attention to this testimony.
The head of the hospital there came to her one evening or one afternoon and said, I think there's something you would like to see. and he took her down to the surgical suite or whatever it was in the hospital where they had brought these beings, and they took her into the room and she saw them. They wouldn't let her get close to them, but she stood by the doorway and looked at them. As she was looking at them, one of them moved its middle finger on its hand. The hand moved. So it was, whatever it was living at that time. She went home that evening, and she was excited about what she had seen, and she sat at the dinner table and told the family what she had seen and what they had told her had happened. And they were all interested and asked questions. And the next day, when she came in from work, she was very somber, and she just told them, "Don't ever mention what I told you, and don't ever ask me anything about it." And she was very frightened. I felt very sorry for her because she lived a very frightened life, because they had told her not to ever speak of it again, and what the consequences would be. And she was frightened her whole life long about it.
I will put these links below.
She passed away in this unusual way, and we started kind of looking at things and talking to people and realizing that many of the other people that were involved in it had died mysterious deaths or disappearances. She was in a motel, and she was not registered at the motel under her name. It was registered under her sister's name, which is very strange. And her sister didn't know she was there. The authorities came in because it was the sister's name and address on the registration. They called her home, and then she knew that her sister had passed away. When the police came and everything, they said that it had to be a suicide, that the door was locked from inside. Like nobody could lock the door from the inside. And, it was all kind of, it just skimmed over the top of it. They didn't go into any research, try to find out anything about her. It just, I just don't believe that she killed herself. I think somebody else did it. There was something that was being covered up, and evidently something important enough that they would kill to keep it.
Okay, let's look at a few more before we get into the testimony of our caller. It's all going to play an important part.
My name is Larry Rolell. I'm the son of Carl Rolell, who was a sergeant in the Air Force. And my dad and I's relationship was, I can't say it was an excellent relationship, but it was a good relationship. We never had any big problems or anything. I was in the late 80s, and I was talking to my dad. We were out in his shop, and we kind of got into a conversation about it then. And that's when he let me know that he had been on the cleanup crew that went out to pick up the crash site in 1947. So we kind of got into it. He didn't want to really, you had to pry things out of him, and it was hard to do. But he was sick back then too, I believe. So I don't know. But he told me about the grays that they got out there, and then turned around, all of a sudden there was 3 of them laying there. So they bundled them up and took them back to the dispensary on the base. After they got out here and they found out they were in over their heads out here, they flew them to Dallas-Fort Worth. And from there, they went to the Little Pentagon, which is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. He told me to be best if I didn't tell anybody. And then he said, you know, that the government had told them when this incident happened, that the government had come to them and gathered them all up, the ones that was out there, and told them that they were not to say anything about this. And they threatened them with their pensions, threatened them with their lives, threatened them with their
pensions, threaten them with their lives. Let's look at another one real quick. It's very important. Do you trust your government to tell you the truth?
My name is Carlene Green, and I live here in Roswell. My father was in the Air Force, and he was stationed here at Roswell at the time, in 47. He was assigned as part of the cleanup crew out at the site. He had the highest security clearance that the Air Force gives, but he was never able, nor did he ever attempt to discuss the incident. He passed away in 1988. He had his last tour of duty was in Vietnam, where he acquired Agent Orange. Ended up with cancer of the spine. He did not want to die at home. He wanted to die in a military hospital. And as he was laying on the gurney waiting to be loaded into the ambulance, he told me, he said, baby, he said, the story is true. He said, don't let anybody try to tell you any different. He said, the incident happened. There was a spacecraft. He said there were grays out there. And I kissed him, and that's the last I got to talk to my dad. But he was very committed.
Okay, let me bring you one more. Then we're going to get on with the story. We're going to learn the truth of Roswell, New Mexico. And again, save this video, whatever it takes, just in case they take this video down. Okay, let's take a listen here. Be coming up in a few moments. I'm going to put these links below. You'll have the video. It goes on to explain who the person is in July of 1947. If I can skip ahead. I don't want to jump over it here. Let's see if we skip ahead a little bit. Here we go.
Today, Rich and I went to the Roswell Army Base, the Hangar 84, where we met with a witness that came forward for the first time in public. He was reluctant for a long time to come forward.
He was a first-hand witness to an actual, the actual wreckage of the Roswell crash in 1947. Here we are in a pretty big hangar.
And this place here brings a lot of memories.
He doesn't want his name out there. He's afraid of losing his pension. That's what he said to me privately, off the camera. And you know what? He's not the first such Roswell witness to say this type of a thing. I wonder if you can just give us a kind of summary of what you saw when you were here in July of 1947 working at Roswell Army Airfield.
Well, it was very unusual because when I first got here, I was told that what I was going to see, I never saw it. I never was supposed to talk about it.
You saw wreckage.
Yeah.
And did it look like aircraft wreckage? Like an ordinary kind of plane that might have gone down?
I've seen a lot of aircraft wreckage, and they hit the ground, they burn. You can see a lot of burned pieces of what's left over. On this thing, he didn't have that kind of appearance.
So what happened when you went to the hospital?
One door there at the hospital was partially open in the corridor there.
Yes.
And there was a terrible odor there. It was smell, you know. And inside they were working in a small creature.
Did it look human?
No.
No.
You feel confident that that was not a human being?
No, I don't think it was a human being.
I asked him a couple of times, trying to get a sense of, did you really think this was a non-human? He seemed to think it was a non-human. He seemed to be pretty sure about that.
Could you give me any details about what the face looked like? Or did you see eyes, nose, mouth?
The nose was a little much bushy. He wasn't a regular nose like that. He was much just protruded some a little.
Was he dead or alive?
He was still alive. This one was moved a little, and he moved slow, and then he moved the other way.
How close did you get to this creature in the hospital?
Roughly about 20 feet.
Okay, these are just a few of the testimonies of people, eyewitnesses that years and years later have come forward. And actually the very original photograph dating back 1947, when you see the gentleman holding up the weather balloon, I'll try to find that. He's also come forward in the Roswell case. Now let me take you back to our caller. Long line of military family background dating back his father, his father's father, and so on, as far back as the Revolutionary War. The story's going to revolve around our caller's grandfather. Now, in 1947, during the time of the Roswell incident, our caller's grandfather lived in Ohio. The family lived in Ohio at that time, and our caller's father. Now you're going to find this interesting. The grandfather's profession, he was a psychiatrist, and later he would go on to be a high-ranking military official. Now our caller, I pretty much know this by heart, but I've got my notes, stated there was something always odd with his grandfather, that growing up as a young boy and with his dad visiting the grandfather, that every time the telephone would ring, didn't matter who was in the room, who was in the house, what company they had, he cleared everyone out of the house. Everyone immediately got cleared out whenever his phone would ring. Now, I'm going to take a look at the caller's background. I think you're going to find this interesting. Again, the caller is military. Now, he informed me that during basic training, boot camp, and then he went on for special training, which we can't talk about. There was an incident where something got pinned on him wrongfully. He got wrongfully accused of something, and the military police intervened, and they took him in to this room for questioning, and he noticed there were some pretty high-ranking officials present, some top brass, and when they seen who he was, they started acting very, very nervous. They started chain smoking, one cigarette after the other, looking at each other, looking at him, really, really acting strange and very, very nervous. Again, smoking one cigarette, they put it out and they light another one. And he overheard the one telling the MP, do you realize whose grandson that is that you brought into us? Now I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Now later on, after our caller spent a great deal of time in the military, when he left the military for employment, for a job and a resume, he had to have a background check performed for this job. So he goes to the local sheriff office to pick up his background check. And I know I've done that with my line of work. I have to get fingerprinted and a background check. And he noticed something odd. He had a friend with him. And they noticed the sheriff was acting very strange. The sheriff could not look at them. Could not look at him, rather. Couldn't even make eye contact with him. And the reason being, the friend said, what is that on your background check? There was a series of letters, CMA, followed by a series of numbers. The sheriff knew that our caller had this code. And what this code is, it's given to diplomats. He had diplomatic immunity through his grandfather. Now the caller says, are you ready to learn what really took place in Roswell, New Mexico? And viewers, are you ready to learn the truth? I was told, and I was told over and over again, the original press release that came out in Roswell, New Mexico, of a flying disc is indeed the truth. Everything else was a lie, a cover-up. There was no downed German wing UFO that they thought was a UFO, and it surely was no weather balloon. And he goes on to explain that something we need to understand. They knew about these for quite a while. Remember, going back to World War II and Nazi Germany and the Holocaust and their advances in technology, going back for a long time, they knew about this. And around the 1940s, they figured out that by using their military radar, they could knock these things out of the sky. They could set them off course, they could make them wobble and make them crash. The Roswell incident, ladies and gentlemen, was not the first. There was an incident prior in Mexico. I hope you're bearing with me. Now, there's a great deal to bring you. I just want to be careful. What was uncovered was the wreckage of a downed disc, which the military used, knocking it out of the sky with their radar. And if you'll notice, if you go back to the very beginning of this series, we were talking about 3,000, now probably close to 4,000 unexplained UFO sightings that just simply can't be explained away. And they all have one thing in common. They're susceptible to radar. So what we got here, you got to remember the grandfather is residing in Ohio. He's got some top military clearance. He's a psychiatrist. This took place in Roswell, New Mexico. What they did, they went to the crash scene and they picked up as many pieces, all the pieces, every bit of evidence they could, from very small pieces of this craft, this down disc, to a very large piece, which was larger, I believe, than a full-size automobile, full-size car. Now I'm told there were 4 victims of the crash. 2 were dead. I guess they brought in an ambulance, and 2 were alive. One was barely hanging on to life, but nonetheless alive. It would move and it would be able to twitch its body and slightly move its fingers. The other one was well alive. They gathered up all the evidence and the bodies, and they made a quick stop first to, I believe it was Arizona. Then they moved everything just outside of Dayton, Ohio, where the grandfather is from. Remember this? To Wright, Patterson Air Force Base, Hangar 18. We will continue. We will continue. Leave me comments. Now I want you to remember, and the caller wants you to remember. Now, where we leave off, all the evidence, everything makes a quick stop to Arizona, and then it is quickly whisked away with a one survivor to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, just outside of Dayton, Ohio, Hangar 18. Now going back to the 40s again, and look in the 50s, where the UFO sightings increased. They were buzzing the Capitol building. And we were going to talk about the Rainbow Project, or better yet known as what a lot of you don't believe today, the technology that has come from this, the Philadelphia experiment. Oh, it's been debunked. It's been debunked. It's not true. Don't always believe what the military tells you. And throughout the series, keep an open mind. I just seen a video yesterday where, coming out of the Iraq War, where they're wondering, are they bending light? How did they do this? Because it shows a soldier appear out of nowhere, and jump upside and get inside a tank. To be continued, the interview and where the grandfather comes in. Stay tuned, everyone. Leave me comments.